Imagine you're walking through an ancient city, and you turn a corner, and suddenly you are just staring up at these awe-inspiring, massive red brick ruins soaring into the sky. Well, you'd be looking at the Serapeon. It's widely known today as the Red Basilica, right in the heart of ancient Pergamon, which is modern-day Bergama in Turkey. Built way back in the 2nd century by the Roman Emperor Hadrian, this thing is absolutely one of the largest and honestly most unusual temple complexes of the ancient world. It's a place where history doesn't just sit on a page, it is physically stacked layer upon layer in the very bricks and stones that have somehow survived the rise and fall of entire empires. So welcome to our explainer on this magnificent structure. Today we're going to unpack the secrets of the Red Basilica, a building that has literally witnessed some of the most dramatic cultural shifts in human history.
But before we spend too much time looking up at those towering walls, we actually need to look down, because this massive structure hides a secret that sounds, frankly, almost impossible. There is a roaring ancient river that has been secretly flowing directly beneath this very building for nearly 2 millennia. I mean, think about it. While we might stress out over a minor plumbing leak in our house today, ancient architects literally swallowed a roaring river just to build this temple. It is a mind-bending feat of engineering, and we're going to look exactly at how they pulled it off and why in the world they went to such extreme lengths to build right in this specific spot.
All right, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, a multi-layered history. Second, the Salinas tunnels. Third, temple architecture. Fourth, massive artifacts. And finally, resurrecting the past.
Section 1, a multi-layered history.
So, back in the 2nd century, this place was a grand pagan temple dedicated to Egyptian gods, specifically Serapis, Isis, Harpocrates, Osiris, and Apis. The Romans actually had this really deep fascination with Egyptian deities. But as the centuries rolled by and paganism was eventually banned, the structure didn't just sit empty, it was completely repurposed. During the early Byzantine period, a Christian basilica was built right inside the main temple. If you're familiar with the Book of Revelation in the Bible, this very site became one of the famous 7 churches of Asia Minor, the Church of Pergamon. But the story doesn't even stop there. By the Ottoman period, the northern rotunda of the complex was transformed into a mosque. And, remarkably, it continues to serve as an active place of worship to this very day. So you have this single complex holding the prayers of Egyptian cults, early Christians, and Muslims, all within its walls.
Section 2. The Salinas tunnels.
Now, to really appreciate this structure, we have to talk about the sheer audacity it took to build it. The Romans chose a location that was completely uneven, and oh yeah, it had a river running right through the middle of it. The Kutsal Avalu, or the Sacred Courtyard, was designed to be an absolute behemoth. We are talking about 20,000 square meters. That's measuring roughly 200 by 100 meters. This was this massive gathering space where worshippers would undergo these elaborate purification rituals before they ever even stepped foot inside the main temple. It was surrounded by towering walls and those columned galleries known as stoyas. But to create this massive, flat, paved courtyard, the ancient engineers had a huge problem to solve: the Bergama River, known back then as the Salinas River.
So how do you get a perfectly flat, massive courtyard on ground level when a river is in your way? Well, their solution underground was to literally swallow the river whole. They constructed 2 giant, side-by-side, double-vaulted tunnels stretching for about 200 meters, effectively channeling the entire river underneath the courtyard. And here's the crazy part. This incredible bridge tunnel system is still fully intact today. If you visit Bergama right now, that river is still rushing through those exact same ancient Roman tunnels directly beneath the ruins. It is just a stunning testament to their architectural genius.
Section 3, temple architecture.
Okay, so moving from that courtyard into the central, towering structure, you would actually be shocked by its original appearance. Today, the building gets its name, the Red Basilica, from its stark, fired red brick. But originally, you wouldn't have seen a single brick. The entire exterior and interior of this rectangular giant, with its huge doors and windows, were completely covered in dazzling, colorful marble revetments. It must have been blinding in the sun. Over the centuries, though, that precious marble was stripped away, which is what left the raw structural red brick exposed. Now, inside this gleaming marble hall, there was a high podium, where a colossal cult statue sat, and it was surrounded by these wide, shallow pools used for water rituals, symbolizing the sacred waters of the Nile River.
But here is where it gets incredibly fascinating. I want you to picture standing in that temple. The air is thick with incense, the reflection of the marble is shimmering in those shallow pools, and suddenly, you hear the booming, resonant voice of a god echoing directly from a colossal statue. It begs the question, how did the ancient gods speak directly to the people?
Well, it was essentially ancient special effects. Beneath the main building is a complex network of hidden tunnels and underground rooms. During ceremonies, the priest would slip into these tunnels completely unseen. They'd navigate to secret chambers located directly beneath those massive cult statues. And because the statues were partially hollow, the priests could speak right through them. They were basically throwing their voices to create this awe-inspiring voice of God illusion for the worshippers up above. I mean, it was an absolute masterclass in religious theater.
Now, flanking this main theatrical space were the rotundas. These are two massive, symmetrical, domed, cylindrical towers positioned on either side of the main temple. Archaeologists believe these dark, imposing spaces were used for secret Egyptian mystery rituals, or maybe as libraries or rooms to house sacred relics. And the most brilliant detail about these rotundas? The northern one has survived completely intact, right down to its original ancient roof. Because it was structurally sound, it was actually converted during the Ottoman era into the Kurtuluş Mosque, which completely saved it from falling into ruin.
Section 4. Massive Artifacts.
As you can imagine, when you have a complex this large, the things inside it are going to be equally colossal. The sheer variety of what has been dug up here perfectly encapsulates that multi-layered history we've been talking about. They found evidence of a towering 10-meter-tall cult statue of Serapis. They discovered giant support statues, known as caryatids or telemonts, that stood back to back, featuring the lion-headed Egyptian goddess Sekhmet on one side and a traditional male Egyptian figure on the other. They unearthed hundreds of those colored marble revman plates that once covered the brick. And honestly, the wildest juxtaposition of all is that right alongside this pagan grandeur, they found early Byzantine baptismal fonts, ceramics, and coins from when the building was transformed into a Christian church.
I actually want to pause on that 10-meter-tall Serapis statue for a second, just because of how it was made. It utilized something called the acrolithic technique. This is a clever construction method where the really expensive, heavy stone, like marble, is only used for the head, the hands, and the feet. The massive main torso, though, that would be constructed out of wood, which was then likely draped in real fabric or precious metals. And we know this because archaeologists actually found giant marble fingers and fragments of giant feet lying right there in the temple's water basins, just left behind after the wooden torso rotted away or was destroyed centuries ago.
Section 5. Resurrecting the Past.
The preservation of this site has essentially been a massive relay race spanning nearly 150 years. It all started back in 1878 with the initial discoveries by a German engineer named Karl Humann. Then, in the early 20th century, legendary archaeologists Wilhelm Dorpfeld and Theodor Wiegand from the German Archaeological Institute conducted the first really detailed architectural mappings and scientific excavations. Fast forward to the late 20th century, and under Professor Wolfgang Rath, crucial emergency work was done. They literally saved the massive brick walls from collapsing by reinforcing them with heavy steel tie rods. And today, that amazing legacy of preservation continues under the current excavation director, Professor Felix Pearson.
Now, a crowning achievement of this modern era of archaeology at the site is the practice of anastylosis. It's a big word, but it's basically the incredibly meticulous process of reassembling fallen, ruined monuments using their original architectural elements, like putting together a giant ancient puzzle. Architect and archaeologist Dr. Klaus Nolan performed an absolute masterstroke of anastylosis here. He successfully pieced together and re-erected one of those giant back-to-back Sekhmet and male Egyptian support columns, placing it exactly back in its original spot in the courtyard. So when you visit today, seeing that towering lion-headed goddess standing proud gives you an immediate, visceral sense of the scale and artistic majesty of that original courtyard. And that really brings us to a pretty fascinating final thought. We've just explored a site that began as a magnificent Roman temple to Egyptian gods, morphed into an early Christian basilica, saw part of itself become an enduring Islamic mosque, and today stands as a modern archaeological marvel. The Red Basilica forces us to recognize that history isn't static, right? It is constantly being repurposed. It leaves us with this incredible question. When we look at the monumental structures we're building today, what will future civilizations build on top of them? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.